don't you just hate runners? Self-righteous braggarts running all over the place, often in groups, taking up the streets and the sidewalks. And they're talking in this running lingo about their distances and their PRs, and they're thinking they're better than everyone. And they're out running marathons, running their mouths. And I'm one of them. I didn't used to be a runner. It was something I started a few years ago. And I didn't know why or how I began. But before I knew it, running took over weekend mornings when everyone else I knew had gone out the night before. Some, no doubt, just going to bed as I hit the snooze button before heading off to a race. And as I stood with my number pinned on me in the start corral, often on a frigid New York City morning, I kept thinking, why the hell am I doing this? Is frostbite really worth combating weight gain? Am I running to something or running from? In fact, I used to hate runners. But now, what I hate more than anything is when I have to cancel a race. Which is what happened a couple of years ago, when my uncle died. And he was old and in his 80s, so it was less a tragedy than a bittersweet celebration. And of course, my family got together for the funeral, which led us to talking about other family members who died, which led us to talking about my father. Now, when I was a little girl, I thought my father was God. And I know that sounds a little Paul Auster, and a lot of little girls think the same thing. But the difference with me was that I never knew him. He died when I was 1. And because I don't have any memories of him, he lived only in my imagination. I never knew much about him, and I was never comfortable asking questions. Sure, I'd seen photographs and heard stories, but I didn't have any proof of my own that he ever existed. But it wasn't always all tears. I tell myself, you don't miss what you don't have. And hey, when I started dating, my competition were all these neurotic girls with their daddy issues. Not me. Girls with dead dads have less issues. But I always equated religion with being closer to my father, because this meant that he was still alive, just in this unseen world called heaven. Christianity dictates that one day I would literally see him and meet him, and all this confusion and this general feeling of being cheated out of experiences, that would be okay. So at some point, I started getting into Christianity. And at the time, my brother was becoming a fundamentalist Christian, so that didn't hurt. He even gave me a Bible. Now there's some solid reading. The Bible's a freaking cool horror story filled with murder and smiting and sodomy. However, I was reading this because I wanted to commune with the dead. My brother, friends, televangelists, they were all saying that we're going to reunite with these people, and that's all I wanted. Just to see these people that I've lost, and this one person I never had in this invisible world. So of course, I got into Ghost Hunters, and it was awesome at first. For those who don't know, it's a TV show with these guys, Grant and Jay. They were plumbers, but when the sun went down, they were scientists, because they would use thermal cameras and EVP recorders and science to prove and debunk hauntings. And call something science, it's legit. So every Wednesday, I would rush home to watch the 4-hour Ghost Hunters marathon. And the next day, I would be so excited, and I would tell everybody, last night's show was amazing! They found proof the house was haunted! Really. Ghosts were doing the craziest things! Off camera! Every time! Grant and Jay wouldn't lie to me, would they? And of course, it never dawned on me that this was a television show. But eventually, the debunkers were getting debunked. And I started to think that maybe there weren't little ghosts on this show. The thing with faith is, you can say, I want to believe, until you realize wanting has little to do with it. You either do or you don't. And it took a while to admit it to myself, but eventually I realized that I didn't believe in ghosts, and I didn't believe in God. And that was a terrible and heartbreaking realization, because that meant that I would never meet my father, when my whole life I just thought I would. And years later, there I was talking to my family about at my uncle's funeral, and we're discussing lost family members and other things that make me uncomfortable, and I'm still pissed about missing my race, when it dawned on me that I never asked about the day my father died. And it was a question that had been recently nagging at me, but I just couldn't figure out a way to bring it up. But here we are at a funeral, and fuck it, we're at a funeral. So I asked. And the story went that my family was all set to go out to dinner, and I don't have any memories of this because I was a year old. But before we were going out, my father had to go for a run. A run? And that's when it hit me. My father was a runner. All these years, I had been trying to figure out how to get closer to him in death. And as soon as I stopped that, I started doing what he did the last few moments he was alive. It's amazing how those you know, or those you never knew, can shape your life as much as those you did know. Absence is the forgotten chisel, and like the breeze, it's visible only by effect. Wheezing breath, freezing fingers, rotting toenails. Running is self-mutilation for the obnoxiously healthy. The physical pain, a welcome distraction from the emotional. There comes a time when you find yourself either running away from something or running to it. And in this case, the running is literal. For me, it's a chase. A futile chase after stolen time and lost experiences. The things I'll never catch, no matter how far or how fast I go. Thank you.
Janet Turley.